The next session is from bench to billions, nurturing biotech to mega scale. So as you all know, right, in the previous session we saw cultivated seafood, we saw plant-based ingredients, plant-based meat, plant-based dairy. These are different production platforms for making meat, eggs, and dairy from alternative sources. There are three key pillars: plant-based, fermentation-derived, and cultivated or cell-based, as you know, right? So within these three key pillars, obviously, there's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of spectrum of hybrid products which could be created, like cultivated fats could be used, et cetera, in the future. So there's a lot of synergy, but there's also a lot of scale-up issues because it's a novel technology sector. So we have a lot of pharma and biotech industry in India, right? A lot of infrastructure. We have one of the largest manufacturers of vaccine. We have a lot of production capacity. And at GFI, we've always seen a lot of overlap within the cultivated meat industry, cultivated dairy industry, and the bio and pharma infrastructure we've had, and the success we've had in our country when it comes to those industries. So, as you know, founded by an Indian entrepreneur, here's an example, Dr. Uma Valeti. He's an Indian origin entrepreneur in the US and one of our keynote speakers at Smart Protein Summit 2021. He created a company called Upside Foods, which opened a plant which is capable of making 50,000 pounds of cultivated meat a year in the States, the largest facility of its kind in North America, right? And it's located near San Francisco. That has brought cultivated meat quite closer to reality. Similarly, Laurus Bio, again in our audience today, from India, recently opened up a precision fermentation plant with over 200,000 liters volumetric capacity in Bangalore this year. So things are moving up within fermentation and cultivated domains as well. So to learn more about the key levers to advance product innovation and build a roadmap towards commercialization of bio-enabled solutions, particularly cultivated, fermentation-derived, and hybrid smart proteins, let's start this panel by introducing our session chair and moderator, Mr. G.S. Krishnan, from Association of Biotechnology-led Enterprises. Mr. Krishnan is an experienced thought leader in industrial biotechnology and is passionate about sustainable solutions for climate change. With 35 years of experience of strategy, management, and multinational corporates, Krishnan now engages with biotech companies and startups as an advisor and a mentor. Krishnan has previously worked closely with decision makers in regulatory areas and policy advocacy to propagate the importance of valuable biotech solutions to protect the environment. I'll invite Mr. G.S. Krishnan to take up his position on the dais. With a round of applause, obviously, from the audience. A very warm welcome. Our second panelist for the day is Vinod Kumar, String Bio, from String Bio. Vinod Kumar obviously co-founded String and currently serves as its managing director. From his first job as a teenager managing the supply chain for his family's FMCG business to leading cross-functional teams at global multi-billion-dollar companies in the telecoms and data networking industries, he has over 23 years of experience in product development, engineering, manufacturing, customer experience, and operations. An outsider to the biotech industry, Vinod's passion to deliver measurable and sustainable impact towards climate change in his lifetimes shapes his work at String. Vinod, please join us on the stage as our second panelist for this session. A big round of applause for Vinod Kumar of String. Third, we have Dr. Manish Diwan from BIRAC. Dr. Manish Diwan has a PhD from Jamia Hamdard and ICGEB New Delhi in pharmaceutical sciences and immunology. In his illustrious career spanning more than 25 years, Dr. Diwan has worked with corporate behemoths such as Daiichi Sankyo Life Sciences, Dabur, Ranbaxy, and at BIRAC, Dr. Diwan is working at the research and entrepreneurship interface to empower and guide emerging biotech enterprises with cutting-edge innovations for commercialization and scaling. Dr. Diwan will welcome you on the stage. Please have a round of applause for Dr. Diwan. Our fourth panelist is an entrepreneur, Shubhankar Takle. Shubhankar is the Chief Technology Officer at Myoworks. Myoworks aims to create an ecosystem of ancillary products for the cultivated meat industry, starting with their novel scaffolding solution. We'll welcome Shubhankar on the stage. Yes. With a round of applause, obviously. Shubhankar was one of the innovator showcases at the Future of Protein Summit 4 years ago, and now he's one of our panelists. So obviously, startups are growing up in this sector quite a lot. And our fifth panelist is from Laurus Bio. I gave the example earlier when I was introducing this session, Mr. Subramani Ramachandrappa. Subramani is the founder and MD of Laurus Bio, previously known as Rishcore Life Sciences, which specializes in developing and manufacturing animal origin-free recombinant protein and enzymes. Laurus Bio's product replace ingredients which are otherwise sourced from animals and used for manufacturing medicines and food. Laurus Bio also provides contract research, CRO, and large-scale CMO, contract manufacturing, services to biopharma and novel food industries. Subbu is an engineer and holds an MBA from Indian School of Business. A very warm welcome to all of you on this dais, and I'll let the session chair and moderator, Mr. G.S. Krishnan, to take the session forward.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. I know this is the last session before the lunch, and I'm sure there will be a lot of appetite. And we have a very distinguished panel. In fact, I should first of all thank GFI and FICCI for putting this together and inviting. And it's a great pleasure to represent from ABLE for this particular session and chair the session. In fact, the bioeconomy today, as most of you might not have known, is at $80 billion US. And the projection by DBT by 2030 is 300 billion. So we were just wondering which are all the areas which will probably contribute to this development. We are happy today that most of it will come from smart protein. That's what has been projected today. So definitely for all those entrepreneurs and all the good startups who are really doing very well, you deserve a very big applause, and you are contributing towards the bioeconomy of the country. And we are sure you will be successful. Thank you very much and good luck. So, as you all know, today, India is the most sought after destination when it comes to manufacture, when it comes to innovation, especially in the smart protein area. And there is a projection and there is a potential for setting up a 10 million liter fermentation facility with an investment of more than $500 million US, which will probably give a revenue of more than $1 billion US in the next 3 to 5 years. With this as the potential, we need to understand, should we ensure and capitalize on this opportunity? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the roadblocks? And how we are going to address them? Today we have a very distinguished panel to tell us all about what's happening, what is their perspective, what do we need to support them, what does the government need to do, is what we will be debating today. I would like to introduce from left, Mr. Subramani Ramachandrappa, the founder and CEO of MD of Laurus Bio, previously Richcore, a very, very passionate individual in this particular segment, and he is already a hands-on man on setting up facilities, and he's looking at setting up more. Give a big applause to Subramani. We also have with us Dr. Manish Diwan, Head Strategic Partnership and Entrepreneurship Development, BIRAC. In fact, when I was sitting with him now, I asked him how many of the startups in the protein area BIRAC has funded. He said not yet, and that's what we will hear from him today, how many is going to fund from the BIRAC very soon. That's what we hopefully can hear from him today. Give a big hand to Dr. Manish Diwan. Mr. Vinod Kumar, co-founder, String Biotech, again, an organization which comes from a very, very good R&D background. Dr. Eril, some of you might have not known, Mrs. Vinod Kumar, who has been also part of the founder for this particular enterprise. They recently got the funding, which is something very, very important for most of you to understand. While biotech sector, there is always challenge in getting the funding. They have been very successful, and definitely they deserve a very big applause. Shubhankar Takle, founder, Myoworks, again, something unique which they have been doing. I'm sure that this particular session today, we will get to know from each of them the challenges, the opportunities, and what, according to them, we should be prepared for achieving the potential. With this, let me quickly go over to giving you all the background. As I already mentioned, India has a significant role to play in the development of these bio-enabled solutions globally. We have the potential to accelerate new product innovation. Yeah, thank you. New product innovation and lay down the path towards cost reduction, essentially advancing the sector on key dimensions of taste, price, and accessibility, and establishing a model for growth in the developing world. Going over to Dr. Diwan, BIRAC has been instrumental in supporting technology startups right from ideation, incubation, and acceleration for commercialization. What role can BIRAC play to help accelerate the commercialization and venture building efforts in this field? Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. It was very interesting to hear from the off the dais the proceedings and the pitches that we just heard about. I think the critical element is that if we can create a ecosystem where such entrepreneurs and young startups can thrive, and there's a continuous pipeline, a vibrant pipeline of such innovations which can continuously churn. That is a success criteria for nation at large, and presence of our innovation ecosystem that can effectively contribute at the global level. Today, as some people have mentioned, I think there is a progression for last couple of years in this direction. Initial thoughts, then few startups who are sharing the dais, raising substantial funding from investors and attention from the industry. So I think the role of an enabling agency like BIRAC is to create that capacity nationwide, and both in terms of helping, nurturing, and hand-holding, mentoring the individual entrepreneur or a startup, plus building a capacity where these entrepreneurs and startups can actually go and work. None of them would have their own industry-like capacities to move from ideation to product development, right? So the capacity building in terms of common access infrastructure like incubation centers, and post those incubation centers somewhere they can actually go try out early stage manufacturing before they can raise substantial money to fund and create their own manufacturing facilities. So that element of increasing in the number of entrepreneurs, number of startups is on the rise. We've been seeing almost like 1,000 biotech startups getting added every year, even in the pandemic days. Unfortunately, in this particular area, which is the new technology advancement, and not too many examples of fermented precision protein, smart protein, or cultivated protein final products in the market. This is on the build-up stage, and we need to collectively emphasize on the significance of this area, which can actually contribute going forward in 5 to 10 years down the line. So at present, what the BIRAC or DBT has been promoting, it has identified this as a niche area where more emphasis can be given. And going forward, I think that might translate into funding more number of innovations in the sector. The incubation network that has been created, we have consciously started adding fermentation facilities, for instance, upstream, downstream capacities in such incubation centers. That needs to increase as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manish. And you all heard it. Going forward, BIRAC will be funding. Over to Subbu. Laurus Bio has been developing and manufacturing animal origin-free recombinant proteins and enzymes to novel food companies globally. How do you envision India's role in the global alternative protein industry?
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. Thank you, GFI, FICCI, and all the organizers who have us here. We started a biotech company in 2005. So back then, we didn't have the support of the VC community, or nor did we have the forums like this where we could go and speak about it. In fact, we went to BIRAC and we had our own challenges there. So we came in at a very early stage, and funding was quite a challenge then. Now I'm so happy to see that it's a lot more easier for us to get into the biotech space. When we started making animal-free proteins for making medicine safer, like for people who made vaccines or cell culture. So we were doing animal-free proteins for the last 10 years, and we have a whole host of it, like growth factors, albumins, and everything else which is now being used for cultured meat, for example. In the past, technology in India would catch up to what's happening in the West, especially in biotech and pharma, maybe a decade or even 3 or 4 decades later. Like in the morning, there was a discussion that what's happening in the West is already happening in India. In fact, one of the earlier panels, they said they may be a year behind the companies in the West as far as technology development is concerned. I think for the first time, precision fermentation or cultured meat or whatever this industry we call it is very close to where the West is. So we are almost at the starting line. And India has done a phenomenal job in the past in generics or pharmaceuticals to be able to catch up to the global space, vaccines, for example. And now, for the first time, this industry is in the starting line, which means with our kind of manpower, our kind of diligence to work and being able to innovate, we could actually be market leaders. So I'm betting that this, first of all, will be the century of biotechnology, and India is going to play a very strong role because creating infrastructure is not very difficult. The challenge would be people. And I think India's biggest strength is the people we have in this industry, both from biopharma manufacturing or biosimilar manufacturing or allied biotech industries. And if you look at US, Europe, or many other countries, they don't have the critical mass of people. And I think that's going to be the biggest advantage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subramani. In fact, one thing which take away from what Mr. Subramani was mentioning, first and the foremost, the situation, what it is today vis-a-vis what he has experienced, it's a drastic change. There are a lot of support and opportunity for startups, number one. Number two, this is the first time a segment which India will be leading. Most of the time, we have a tendency, in spite of capabilities, to follow what's happening elsewhere in the world. But this is one time, for the first time, which we will continue to definitely lead the world. And this segment, there is a lot of sort of awareness in the rest of the world to look for India and look for India capabilities to approach. So it's definitely an opportunity and something which all the startups should be very proud about. Over to Mr. Vinod. String Bio is producing next-generation high-protein ingredients derived from methane. The products you're building at String are highly sustainable and scalable. What is the end goal for String? Is a food system powered by microbial protein on the horizon?
Thanks, Krishnan. Thanks for the question, and thanks to GFI for pulling this together. I think it's phenomenal to see the journey of alternate proteins over the last 5 years in the eyes of GFI. String, we've been doing this for about 8 years now. This is our 9th year. A lot of tech development for us. We are actually one of the, as Subramani was saying, we're actually one of the world leaders in gas fermentation today. There are only a handful of companies globally. We are the only ones in Asia. And we understand, gas fermentation very, very well. So we use methane to make different products. So over the last few years, we have spent a lot of time building proteins for the nutrition space for the animal sector, largely. And we also do a lot of products in the agricultural space. For us, we are foraying into the human nutrition space right now too. Again, from a nutrition perspective, it's not dramatically different. We've been working the technology for the last few years in stealth mode. So very soon you will see partnerships that we will announce in terms of what we do. So we are a B2B company. So for us, it's all about ingredients, it's all about scale, and it's all about cost. So we are not looking to put in branded products in the market. In fact, we will be the suppliers for a lot of you that are looking at proteins. We'll be yet another alternative protein that is out there for your formulations, whether it is for alternate meat or alternate dairy or any other protein source. So from that perspective, I think for us, it's all about scale, which obviously we'll talk soon in terms of what fermentation can bring to the industry. Yeah.
Thank you, Vinod. Again, most of you were looking at B2B, and that's what would be the trend in most of the cases as far as this segment is concerned. Going over to Shubhankar, Myoworks has made significant progress on cultivating meat from animal stem cells since our first Future of Protein Summit in 2019. Could you highlight for us the key milestones in your journey?
Yeah, first off, thank you for GFI for organizing this. It's always a great platform to talk about the work we're doing at Myoworks, and I'm assuming same goes for the other entrepreneurs on the dais. So yeah, we started Myoworks, started working on this project. It wasn't even called Myoworks in 2019. And we were looking at this idea. It seemed like a very convincing space, a convincing pain point. And the first milestone, I guess, for our journey was when we were like, okay, we need to test. We can make scaffolds easily, but we need to first test them with cells. How do we do that? So all directions and all roads pointed to BIRAC. And so we were grateful to receive our BIRAC BIG15 in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, so plans changed a little bit for a while, but finally we got it back on track after the pandemic ended in some ways. And so yeah, we then were able to establish our proof of concept, and then since then we've gone on to kind of get another grant from the Good Food Institute and forayed into developing cell lines for the cultivated meat industry as well. So that's a second project that we're working on. So the idea is to create an ecosystem for the cultivated meat entrepreneur to just buy things off the shelf, like they buy Laurus Bio recombinant proteins and make their formulation, to be able to do that. And I think those have been kind of the milestones, getting the GFI grant, being helped by BIRAC, BIG in the beginning in 2020. And very recently, we've also closed our first round of pre-seed funding with Anchor Capital. And so that's also been very valuable that there are investors out there in the Indian ecosystem who are ready to support deep science, deep biotech. Because that takes patient money, that takes smart money, and we're so grateful for that.
Thank you. Unlike with the plant-based meat where the Indian market is moving fast and turning heads, our region lags far behind on cultivated and fermented derived proteins, which account for more than half of all alternative protein investment globally. Shubhankar, could you highlight for us where we are globally with regard to the cultivated meat industry and what's holding us back in India?
I think, as the other panelists said, nothing's really holding us back. One of the things that could be done a lot better is, some kind of ways. I think biotech usually has to talk to government at several points, whether it's regulatory approvals, whether it's animal testing, whether it's exports and imports, and all our materials are cold chain, so everything has to go from one place to another in a defined period of time. So I think just that communication with the outside world and that communication with the government, if those things could be lubricated to be faster, better, cheaper, more streamlined, I think we would do so much more. So many entrepreneur hours go in finding solutions to those problems. If those solutions are found more easily, because BIRAC is such a nodal agency, they have, they are supporting so many biotech companies around the world, around India. So, I'm sure that all of them have similar problems. So solving those problems on a systemic level will help accelerate this industry a lot more.
Okay, but then just to address some of the things which you have said, first and foremost, of course, BIRAC can support. They have the nodal agency. I think Mr. Subramani has a lot of experience exporting from here, and of course there are challenges, and somebody from the startup also mentioned that they do have the license to export, right?
Certainly,
so
certainly.
I would suggest that if there is a specific challenge which you have been looking at, it, even bring it to ABLE, then probably we will coordinate with BIRAC. Would you like to say anything on this, Manish?
I think collectively, many enabling bodies, including the DPIIT, there is a great emphasis on how to sort the logistics challenge. And during the COVID, you would have noticed everything came together. And while there were immense lockdowns all across, but there were a supporting machinery working on one-on-one basis. So something can be worked out. Maybe if you drop a line, we can take it up further. Thanks.
Thank you, Manish.
Over
like to you, Vinod.
Can I just add to that?
Go ahead.
So there are two parts here. One is if they are recombinant clones, right? The government has a well-established IBSC, GAEC, and it's quite straightforward. You all will be surprised to know that we are actually helping more than 40 precision fermentation companies in the world scale up here in India. So almost every precision fermentation company out of US or Europe, we are enabling their clone from lab to go into large-scale fermentation. So we are actually importing these clones. We're getting the approvals. The plant has been built with food safety and FSSAI, which is compliant with the US. So it's pretty straightforward for recombinant clones. Now, if it comes to cultured meat, these are non-recombinant. It's far more easier. We recently imported, in fact, I've started a new company to make animal fats without animals. And we were able to import these clones quite easily. It's just that we've been doing this for 10 years, so we know where to go. But broadly, the procedures are there. Probably BIRAC could help put it out. And it's quite easy to do that, and very little red tape to bring these things in.
But above all, I would say, all of you, when you face challenges, India has been drumming about Make in India a lot. So make sure that you make all the noise to get it out from here, all that which you produce. I'm sure that there will be big support. Over to you, Vinod. Microbial fermentation is particularly compelling because of its implications on cost, scale, and adaptability to a wide range of feedstocks. What would it take for us to see products of this kind launched in consumer markets? I think some of it you answered already. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's largely building the ecosystem. And I think India is well on its way, right? Just to add to what Dr. Diwan said earlier, we were actually one of the second grantees of the big grant, 8 years ago.
Some of them.
So we are well on our way, right, with institutes like GFI and regulatory frameworks that are coming together. We are not there as yet, right? This is a long journey for us, especially in the protein space, to get up to the point. We are, as Subramani also said, very close to global companies in terms of technology development, right? Some of us, at least from a string perspective, I can tell you in the fermentation space, there's not a lot of companies at scale. A lot of companies are still developing the technologies. There are a few companies that are ready for scale, and we are actually one of them, right? In fact, we are going to be building a very large facility next year for, where we'll be manufacturing proteins, not just for human, but for animal consumption, as well as other products in our marketplace. So I think we are well on our way. There are things that we could definitely add to. I think I think capital is very critical for fermentation companies. Organizations like BIRAC have addressed the early part of a company's maturity, right? I think as fermentation companies scale, because if you look at the business model, there is supply and there is demand, right? Supply is get the tech from the lab to scale, build the plants, and then the demand of who's going to consume these products. I think when you look at it from either side of it, on the demand side, obviously it's growing. There's enough reports, enough visibility to the fact that consumers are willing to pay for alternate proteins in whatever form, right? Whether it's meat, non-meat, consumers are willing to pay for it. The question really for fermentation companies is how do we get that scale going, right? One is to have technology that is, at a few thousand liters. But when you want to bring this to scale, you need to have very large fermentation capacities, which means it's a lot of steel, which means a lot of dollars, a lot of rupees, right? It's not a small investment. And in India, one of the challenges that we have seen, and we have seen this through the evolution of our company as well, is at every stage, like for example, when we were talking to investors earlier on, 6-7 years ago, on proteins, they were laughing at us, right? Why do you need proteins? Today, every investor out there has a thesis on proteins. But the disadvantage for companies like us is their theses are still at a $1-2 million investments. Those kind of investments doesn't work for us. We are looking at tens of hundreds of millions of dollars of investments. So we don't have those kind of investors in India. And challenges for outside private equity funds or venture capitalists to put money into India is another well-researched, and a lot of us are living that problem. So I think from a funding perspective, there is more work that needs to happen to bring it to scale. I think that's the main one. And I think the second piece of it is the regulatory side of it. I know there are things evolving, but I think there's a little bit more work that we'll need to do to put our products out into the marketplace. If we want to put a microbial protein today in the Indian ecosystem, we'll obviously need to go through the FSSAI approval, and there's a lot of work that's happening. JFI is also facilitating a lot of that work. It's only a matter of time, but I think once that comes into place, I think capital also will follow, and I think we are headed in that direction.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, in order to drive down the global cost basis for smart protein across all categories, existing biotech and pharma ecosystems in countries like India will be key in scaling up manufacturing infrastructure for the sector. Infrastructure facilities could be located in strategic places which have all the infrastructure for setting these big fermentation facilities. GFI India is mapping out the total biotech infrastructure in India, which potentially can be repurposed towards smart protein application. The industry will also need the support of background factors like ease of doing business, talent availability, technology transfer and trade pathways, regulatory paths to market, etc. To capitalize on this emerging opportunity, one needs to look at all these things. In fact, one area which I would like to say from ABLE perspective, and in fact myself and Ms. Subramani, we have been discussing about skill development. In fact, the job creation, for example, something which Laurus was looking at setting up, required 700 to 800 employees on different sort of category and different roles. And this is where I think the skill development is very, very critical and important, something which ABLE is trying to do in partnership with a few other companies. But let's hear it from them. Again, Subbu, over to you. What are we talking about in terms of manufacturing requirements to help provide the capacity we need? How do we get more pharma and biotech companies excited about the opportunities presented by smart protein?
Firstly, we should get this out of the way. Yes, it is precision fermentation, if it is microbial or it is cultured meat. And biopharma companies have been doing this for many years, but they've mostly done this in small scale. Like if you look at the biggest monoclonal antibody manufacturing facility, which is a cell-based manufacturing, the biggest fermenter could be 2,000 liters, right? But if you're talking about making that food grade or food like the cells itself, then you're talking about several 100,000 liter capacities. So if you look at fermentation, like Biocon's insulin facility could have been like at 100,000 liters, means 1 lakh liter fermenters at the most. But you need 5 lakh liters or even 1 million liter facility for making a food grade product. So getting biopharma or pharma people to shift over is going to be a challenge. Because they're used to higher COGS, they have the experience, but their tendency would be more towards high-value products with lesser focus on cost and cost optimization. The real shift will come from people who did enzymes, like say Novozymes, like Gen and Coors, people who did sugar mills or breweries, who have the fermentation experience, but who should readapt to the technology, because we need to think lower cost of operations if you want to make food-grade products. So I would see that the skills could come from the biopharma, but the application and the ops control will come from more food-based manufacturers. When it comes to cell culture, just imagine, if it was 50, 100 liters, now you're telling you want to make 100,000 liters of cell culture, and you'll sell the cells and not the product it makes. So the biopharma people throw away the cells, right? They, in fact, incinerate it. The whole thinking needs to change. Second thing about infrastructure, I don't think any one company will be able to dominate fermentation manufacturing. My prediction, personal prediction in my opinion, is fermentation or precision fermentation facilities for food or cultured meat will become something like power grids or mobile towers. So somebody would own the asset. We may all buy mutual funds for fermentation manufacturing. Somebody else will use the facility, and somebody will operate it for them. So I am expecting this revolution to happen, because to build 1-2 million liter facility, which we are doing right now, costs like 900 crores in India and probably 1,500 crores outside of the country. So you can't have companies building one plant after the other, because they need 10 plants together. So I expect this to be more like a public funded infrastructure play and lesser of an individual company play.
So would it be appropriate to say this is where all the support from the government should come also in the sector, which is...
Yeah, it's very difficult to set up facilities in India.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Dr. Diwan, the Indian biotech ecosystem has already proved its potential as a hugely cost-effective scale-up with vaccines in the past, and provided itself once again during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. How can we leverage existing infrastructure, expertise, and capital to push forward the growth of smart protein industry?
I think the very reason India's ecosystem could respond to COVID pandemic, both in terms of, let's say, COVID vaccines, developed, curated, manufactured, and then immunized. Similarly, diagnostic kits, cost of diagnostic kits to begin with, when it was composed of all imported ingredients, brought down from 2,500 to now 20 rupees. So all this thing could happen only because India had a relatively mature ecosystem in place, the biotech ecosystem in place. You had startups, you had incubation centers, you had biotech talented young talents, research institutions, plus a core set of biotech industry in place. This will only grow, and as you talked about right in the beginning, that bioeconomy is poised to grow to $300 billion by 2030. The strength of that is basis of this capacity in the country, and the number of such innovations coming out of the startups, and the number of SMEs moving towards the large industry base, and the large industry footprint growing, that collectively only will reflect the outcome of India as a whole. I think today, when we talk about our biopharma, let's say pharma sector converging into biopharma, and the total biopharma sector in the country is very, very small. The highest valuation of our topmost biopharma company is less than 20 billion. And that is similar to 1 quarter earning of one major biopharma company worldwide. So you can imagine, and most of our biopharma companies' valuations are just about $5 billion. So we are not yet there. And as we heard, I think that capacity building similar to CDMOs, which are spread across the country and contributing to India's collective leadership in the generics business, that we become the pharmacy of the world. It's because of those contract manufacturing facilities which are contributing to the outcome of the, let's say, generics business. Similarly, if we have this ecosystem grown and the capacity seeded, not only limited to few large companies, but several such medium scale output capacities, then collectively I think that can be leveraged with the innovation, with the IP that we hold, and then we can have a more kind of negotiating position as a world leader in this space.
Okay. Again, one more question to you. We work with BIRAC to translate early research into inspire a significant chunk of this talent to enter the alternative protein sector and take the jump into venture creation. Your comments?
So in brief, so BIRAC supports across the biotech sector, and it's pretty interdisciplinary large. We have supported only few examples which we are hearing. They got supported, like String Bio got supported almost like 10 years back. Myoworks was a recent one, maybe a few years ago. But I think these are very small numbers. We would have supported about 3,700 beneficiaries over 10 years. And that has been sector agnostic. I'm sorry, subsector agnostic. So in order to capitalize on this potential sector or segment, I think we need to do a collective effort and kind of institutionalize some of the funding awards only for this theme, this particular thematic area. And I think one urge I would place here through this forum is that government kitties are limited, they are finite. It can be more impactful, more strategic once it gets partnered funding or some people come together. For example, if industries think that this is where the future gain in the market position is there, are they willing to invest a little bit at the early stage or at the growth stage, advanced startup stage, so that and join hands with let's say BIRAC. So we can look at co-funding model. 50%, for example, BIRAC contributes. 50% can come from the mature industry. And some innovations which can address the larger challenges can be addressed like that. So we can build those specific awards and funding instruments to push and propel the system. Just an example, both of you mentioned that VC fundings have come in the path after the initial grant in aid. So at the back end, we have also started fund of fund and invested in 10 VC funds. And those VC funds are mandated to invest in the biotech startups. So, and this is going to grow, and in ripple effect, there would be more to follow. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned about this joint investment. Will you be communicating on that? Because we remember we spoke about this even last time on this. I think some communication would also help some of them to look at it, and probably it will also be a motivation for some of the investors to say BIRAC is part of it.
Sure, sure. We'll make it as a more open-ended invitation. So anybody wants to partner, if they can bring a value proposition, not only just funding, but the strength of their expertise, mentorship, and time and commitment. I think that is where these partnerships would actually be worthwhile to take forward. We'll do that, Krishnan. Thank you.
Thank you. Vinod, lower manufacturing costs and a large educated workforce mean that, in theory, the cost of experimentation in India is lower than in developed markets. Where do you currently see the greatest opportunities for ensuring scientific research and development is more relevant to industry? And how do we stimulate technology transfer from researchers to the market?
Yeah. I think the first part of the question you said is, I have a slightly contrarian view to it. I think from a product development perspective, there's clearly, cost arbitrage for us to have setups and work it. For example, for string, the amount of money we have taken to be where we are in the maturity life cycle as a company to some of our competitors is vastly different, right? Our competitors to be where we are have raised 300, 400, 500 million dollars, and we have done a fraction of that to get to where we are. And obviously, that goes a lot to, not just the human resources side of it, but, organizations like BIRAC and other organizations that help. As you take this from lab, from research to market, I think there's a couple of elements to it, right? And I think one is, there's two aspects to it, right? One is collaborating with the technical institutes and IP sharing. I think one thing that I think as an organization, as a country, what we could do better is come up with more standard processes there, because we've reached out to a lot of organizations on the technical side. But IP sharing becomes a problem, and how IP is worked in Indian ecosystem. And this has nothing to do with proteins or biotech. I think this is across the board. I think that's something that needs to be worked to facilitate that more, to translate, good innovation from researchers, universities to industry. And for companies like us that have indigenously developed the technology to get to market, what I said earlier, I think after a certain point, the cost arbitrage kind of goes away. And this is something that I talk to our investors as well, is, as we look at setting up large facilities, and, Subramani shared the numbers, we're not looking at a couple of $1 million, we're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars. When you look at biotech companies, most of your operational cost or COGS comes from certain elements, right? Your raw materials, your electricity, and people. And the biggest advantage we have is with people. But I think from a raw materials perspective, it's still a challenge, right? Like, for example, in our world, when I do the math and I say, now that we are building large facilities, is it better for me to build it in India or build it in another country? If I remove HR, actually other countries are far more attractive from a COGS perspective, right? When I look at cost of gas, when I look at cost of electricity. But when I bring in HR into the picture, then obviously it sways to India, right? And that works for pretty much all large organizations or manufacturing places. So I think, and I can address this in the subsequent questions as well, is I think from a government perspective, as we are scaling and building larger facilities, we need to jointly figure out how to make that happen, because I think there'll be a little bit of hand-holding that needs to happen. I'm a strong believer of capitalism, and I don't think government should do a lot more than what they're already doing. I think capitalism should drive growth. But I think for that early part of capitalism, some kind of funding models to make that happen will help bring that research to market sooner.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Last set of questions. Effective clean technologies at scale often face the dreaded valley of death when a technology is developed but manufacturing process, sustainable value chains, and a clear path to market remain elusive. Private investment alone often struggles to carry firms over this valley. Shubhankar, the cultivated meat industry in India is pre-incubation and often considered to be too small, too risky, and too young. How can we chart a path towards addressing gaps in funding and knowledge to support the growth of the ecosystem?
So I think we're a perfect example. We could have died in the valley of death. I mean, there will be other valleys we'll die on going forward maybe, but for now we forded a couple of years at least. And that was 100% due to grant and aid. We have to kind of, from bench, the title is From Bench to Billions. Let's focus on bench to few thousand rupees first. And that can really be helped with grant and aid. I think that's the first step. Following which, perhaps there is a gap, if there is. Early stage VCs, I would love to appeal to their greed, so to speak, that there is a many X multiple that can be made when biotech succeeds. And that's, I mean, if there is a risk capital involved, then risk is part of it, and then that should be taken, So I think if that is done, many of the startups will be able to ford through, get from POC to clinical trials in the case of pharmaceuticals, or in our case, getting to like that one customer with one paying account, so to speak, and going forward then should be easier. So I think funding availability at all levels and good exit points perhaps would also be great. Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the confidence. Great. Vinod and Subbu, it's for both of you. Alternative proteins require massive scaling up to increase production volumes and lower costs. This entails mobilizing a lot of capital and requires expertise to scale. What kind of incentives would you like to see for advancing infrastructure development for manufacturing scale-up? How were you able to bridge this gap?
I don't know if we have bridged the gap as yet. We're working towards it. And I think I kind of pointed to a couple of it, right? I think there's obviously a lot of investment that is required to make it to scale. Let me step back. I think, see, fundamentally, since we are talking in the context of proteins, right? And I think the example that we can use, a very corollary example is, the semiconductor industry to the communication. What semiconductors means to the communications, right? Protein means that for food. So there's a lot of parallels I think we can look at in terms of what happened in that industry over the last 20, 25 years of how, your PCs to, telephones to, renewable power, how the cost has been come down largely because of innovation in the semiconductor space, which is volumes, capitalism driving it. And I think we need to bring that to proteins, right? Is how do we get, because when I look at it, and this is my personal pet peeve, is when I look at macronutrients on our plate, everything is cheap, right? Your carbohydrates goes from 20, 30 rupees to 40, 50 rupees. Fats is not expensive, but proteins at 200 rupees, 250 rupees, 400 rupees. And I heard some costs that are at much higher, right? And that disparity needs to change. And for that disparity to change, we have to do this at scale, right? We have to do it at scale to drive the costs down, which means, what are the technologies that are out there that can provide that kind of scale? Right? And fermentation obviously is right on top in terms of its ability to provide that scale. But fermentation requires a lot of steel, which means a lot of investments. So we'll need to really look at this and say, okay, how do, and then so it's largely maps to investments, right? Because I'm not talking about technology. I'm assuming the technology works, right? And it's about how do you translate that to business and how does that translate that to the industry's success. So the next question is, where are we going to get that investment from, right? Like very recently, I think a month or so ago, and Subramani is absolutely right? I think India is very well positioned to be that, like how, we are for pharmacy, we can be that for alternate proteins here in India. I think there's a very, very good opportunity for us. Obviously, US has stolen that thunder a little bit. About a month ago, there was an executive order where the US president is announced almost about $3 to $4 billion investments, where they are incentivizing American technology to be manufacturing products in America, right? So is that going to hurt us a little bit? I absolutely think in the life cycle of fermentation, I think it's going to impact Indian ecosystem to a certain point. But that's just a scratch, right? It's just a drop in the ocean. I think there's still a lot of opportunities for us to capitalize. So I think, it's a combination of corporations, government, agencies coming together and saying, how do we hold hands? Like how, the BIRAC program was set up to hold hands of a young startup and taking very high risk where a VC will never put money in, right? Where BIRAC puts money, a VC won't put money. I think we need to translate that model to a more mature startup that is growing, which again has a long way to go, and say, what is the ecosystem we need to build there? What are the kind of funding models we need to build there and take it forward, right? So there's one such model with the DST, right? They have that TDB, Technology Development Board, that helps when in the process of going from, development to commercialization. But there's nothing for growth in India today. So I think there is a vacuum there. I think if we can do something about it collectively as an ecosystem, I think there's a great opportunity for India.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Subbu?
Firstly, I think we need one good example. We need one company, one district, one leader, one bureaucrat to make that decision, take a little risk with the industry, because right now it's workable. Like, you know, our case, we're building a 2 million liter fermentation facility. It'll be the largest food plant in the world, first time. And we built the 200,000 liter facility in 8 months during COVID. So infrastructure is there, vendors are there, equipment manufacturers are there. The problem we are facing now is to get land. Problem we are facing now is to get approvals. Problem we are facing now is not funding. Problem, because you can debt finance it. The business model will work. The problem we have is somebody making it truly ease of doing business, because it is not easy to do business in India, and this is a fact. So if BIRAC can take leadership and get one MP or one MLA to support building precision fermentation plants in one village, and then the model will prove it works. And like you have so many sugar mills, so many beer factories, so many cement factories, you can have so many, because most of the investors want to see that they won't lose their money. Now you got to help at least one factory come up somewhere. So if that can be done from the government, that's good enough, because then it will be a snowball effect. And right now it's been so many years. We built the first plant in 8 months, and since 2 years, we're trying to get land. We are not getting land. We have the funding, we want to build, and that's the problem. So if ABLE, BIRAC can do something about creating one little easy to do business space, I think we youngsters will do a great job.
Can I?
Of course.
So
if you are able to support, sure.
Yeah. So this requires orchestration of the entire machinery. Center, state come together and facilitate it. So there is a provision which has been created. It's called Project Development Cell that works with the Department of Biotechnology, because it's biotech sector in West India, and that is an empowered provision which works with a group of secretaries. And if there is a challenge which is arresting investment, then it can be taken, even escalated further to address a particular. So I would suggest that if you can drop a line to us for PDC, it will be taken up and would get addressed. And it works very closely with the states. And states, as you know, all run these investment promotion summits, right? So it sits over and above that. So we'll try and sort this thing out.
Yeah, before we conclude, I'd like to tell you all one story about the biofuel, the 2G ethanol. 2G ethanol, in fact, India has an indigenous technology. And it was still not viable because there were challenges related to the costs of enzymes to various ingredients going into conversion of agricultural residues. Just to answer Subbu's question, the government of India, the Petroleum Ministry, took a decision that actually the oil marketing companies will set up 3 facilities to start with using agricultural residues, just to make sure it is demonstrated that yes, we can produce over here. It's a commercial facility. No doubt there were challenges related to the viability, even that's being addressed. Something similar to that in this segment, we definitely need to do. We need to do a lot of lobbying to tell the government of India how much potential this segment has got. Probably GFI and ABLE should join together to present the opportunities over here, and probably that's a good idea. Subbu, we should make it happen for sure. With this, very, very quickly, starting from you, 1 minute to say, are you excited or still concerned? Just very quickly.
Yeah, I'm very excited and bullish about cultivated meat. I think, yeah, it's a paradigm shift, but it's bound to happen.
Great.
Super excited. I think, obviously there are challenges, but, that's just opportunities. Lots of great things to happen.
Yep.
No two ways about it. I think this is a moonshot area. Great potential for India to take up the leadership position. 100 billion biomanufacturing hub is aligned towards this. Thanks.
I'm beyond excitement. I'm impatient right now. That's my situation. So if you guys can help set up industries, I think that will be a start.
With this positive response from all our panelists, I would like to say that biotechnology does play an important role. Whenever biotechnology has come out with solutions, it's only success. While no doubt there is always the initial lag phase, it takes time. And of course, a lot of companies which even Laurus Bio is supporting are still getting challenged related to optimization, related to the cost, to the efficiency and everything, but it is an ongoing process. I feel for all of you entrepreneurs over here, this is a fantastic opportunity. India has taken the lead. This is not only going to create a big bioeconomy for India, it is going to be job creation, and India has definitely an opportunity to drive the world in the smart protein area. With this, thanks once again to GFI, especially to Nicole and Varun for supporting us in having this event today. Sorry, I kept you all waiting. I'm sure it was definitely an appetizer for all of you. Thank you very much.